So first off, I just want to say thank you for doing the interview. Thank you for taking your time out of your day to do the interview. Um, you're established yourselves within the League of Legends scene as a force to be reckoned with, especially after coming third in the NLC 2023 Spring Playoffs. What's it like seeing this team that you founded yourself seeing success and growing?
Mm, I mean, it's of course a nice feeling, right? But it's still like just the beginning of a journey. Like it's just like at the very start, and at the moment, if you look at the esport industry, it's actually not really about success in terms of competitive. Like, okay, like winning a split is of course super nice, right? But if you found an esports organization in this current times with Ukraine war, COVID, all of that stuff, right? Like you are in a very hard market. It's not that easy to make your company sustainable, make your company big. Even if you do a super good job and you build the best rosters and you're super successful, that doesn't mean you make money in the end. And that's just the sad reality in the esports world that we are living in right now. It's getting better though, or I believe it will get better. But yeah, that's. I mean, of course, like I think. I mean, personally, we would have loved to go to European Masters, so we were not so happy about third place in NLT. But it's still something good, and especially on the content side, the people that follow us, all of that is something that we can be proud of. But I'm like very calm in terms of my emotions, in terms of okay, I've achieved it, like we did it. Like for me, it's like we have done maybe 1% or something, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to make sure we get sustainable. We need to make sure we create offline facilities. We need to make sure that we scale more. Like our goals have just started, and for 3 months, I think we are good in the run, but there's so much to improve, and it's just the start, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And considering you said starting a League of Legends team is no easy feat, what struggles did you
Mm.
face with the team towards the beginning of its journey, especially considering, like you said, you're a relatively new team?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like esports has like one very good thing, and it's basically globally, right?
Yeah.
Like you, or at least like can or yeah, I mean, all over Europe, right? So you have different crowds, different people, but if you look at it from a company's perspective, it makes things very hard because you need to employ people from different countries. You need to find one country where you then build your company, but then you will work together with people out of so many different countries with different organizations, which is very tricky sometimes legally wise. So that's like the first issue that you're facing when you're building an esport company, and then of course if you want to make it professional, it takes a lot of time, and we had a big struggle because we didn't have that time. So we basically had to develop everything overnight, which was not ideal and not perfect. And nowadays, I would for sure make it differently, but back then we just didn't have the time. And yeah, I mean, you face the classic things when you're an entrepreneur, right? Like you face a lot of stress, you face a lot of responsibility, and especially in those times, I mean, the esports market is very hard, right? Like the big teams are going down. Like no one is really writing black numbers. All of them are in the red numbers. People are trying to figure out how to make esports profitable. The over fluctuated salaries that you have in coaching, in pro play, etc., are going back down again. Like if I compare it, for example, from 3 years ago, like players in the NLC now, or 2 years ago, players in the NLC now earn, I don't know, half or even less than half of what they earned like 2 years ago. So I mean, the market is struggling, but it's like a market correction. But yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, personally, it's very hard. You face a lot of challenges. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of stress, and yeah.
So you mentioned the word entrepreneur. How do you yourself separate being a businessman with being a fan of League of Legends and a fan of esports when it comes to your team?
I mean, it's a very good question, actually. I mean, how do I separate it? I think it's something that you learn by time. I think in the beginning when I started, I for sure couldn't separate it, but I think it's something very important to do because your entrepreneur or company decisions need always to be logical based, I would say, right? Like you cannot just decide because you like this player's personality that he will be on your team because he might just not be good enough, right? Like if both is matching, then of course perfect, right? And you can always have your personal preferences, like no one is perfect, but um Yeah, I mean, in the end, you need to separate it, and I mean, with time, it gets way better. Like by now, I think I've managed it pretty well. But it's a big struggle in the beginning, and of course, I mean, we also do all of this because we love it, right? Like the excitement that you have when you're winning, the fear or the struggles that you have when you're losing, right? Like all of this is part of it, and I would not like to miss it, right? Like I
Yeah.
don't think that anyone that is not into esports or not or doesn't truly love esports should be an entrepreneur in that space. I mean, you have a lot of startups where I don't know people out of other business broncs or industries are coming over and think, okay, esport is the new shit, so I'm starting here. And usually they are not really successful because you kind of need to live it, and if you don't do it, then it makes things harder. It makes it harder talking to players, talking to creators, finding new business model, finding revenue sources, all that kind of stuff.
But as you said, it's all about being part of the community, being part of the industry to have
Yep.
success. And you are having success. Not only are you attracting fans and growing as a team, but you're also attracting big talent with players like Kasing being your support player. And considering he's played for huge teams over his career, such as H2K, Team Dignitas, and Excel, and even having a very brief stint at TSM, how did you draw such an established name in the scene to join your roster?
I mean, we have multiple established names, right? Like also Woolite, who played on Rogue, for
Yeah.
example, or I mean, also Akabane, who played on Big and also multiple times played European Masters. Same for Wow, who was in Carmen Corp, right? So the thing is, like, there are a few tricks, of course, but I mean, the first thing is the circumstances. So the circumstances are like that as I said before, like the salaries are just dropped, right? The whole market
Yeah.
is crumbling a bit. There's like a market correction. That means, okay, you don't need as much money anymore to buy those good players because they are struggling to find good offers either way, right? And then, I mean, I think what Nord provides or what we are really good at, and this is again to something that I said earlier, we know how esports work and we love it ourselves, right? So that makes it usually very easy for us to work with players, to work with coaching stuff. So they know if they are coming here, if they are coming to Nord, they will not face any struggles. Like they know, okay, we have people here that know how everything works. We look after them, we care about them, and yeah, that's already a plus. But I think in general, like the main reason why we have drawn um, those guys is okay. We didn't need to spend as much money because of the market, and then second of all, um, after if you build your roster relatively late, which is something we had to do, right? Because we just started, so we didn't have like the full off season time. You always have basically good players that don't find teams out of whatever reason. You know, they might have an LEC offer that gets cancelled last minute, and then all other good teams are already locked. You know, off season for players can be also for coaches can be really really tough. So you usually always have a few players that are just being overseen or just had like some unlucky stuff going on, and they still want to prove themselves, right? They still want to play. They don't want to pause for 6 months, and then what you can do is you go around, you find those people, you put them together, and you build a roster out of them, and you might end up lucky, like we have been, and together with like some good negotiation skills and all of that, of course, included, you can create a roster like we did with relatively low budget and draw players like that. But yeah.
But as you said, you've clearly got these experienced names that have played in the LEC before, and we've seen teams over the past few years enter competitions and leagues, especially in League of Legends, with some relatively inexperienced players. What do you think that having these experienced and established names does for your team, and what benefits do you reckon they bring?
I mean, for this particular team that we had now in spring, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Like, Vao was a rookie, right? He has never played before in a competitive setup, but he was considered a huge talent. And it's always important to mix those rookies with like experienced players that can lead and that can drive forward,
Mm.
right? And that also can help them and bring the good mood, bring the good work atmosphere, because that's like something super underrated, right? Like you need to have good work atmosphere or good work ethic, and that's something that usually rookies lack, and therefore it's important to have experienced players, but also of course for the clutch moments. Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely the fact that you have these experienced players, it seems that, like you said, they brought a lot of success for you. Considering over the whole of the NLC 2023 spring split, you only lost to two teams, those being Riddle Esports and Verdun in the semi-finals of the playoffs. And as an amazing of a first spring split as you had, you must have something in the works to push yourself further as a team. So what's next for Nord Esports?
I mean, there's a lot to come, right? I mean, to be honest, like our focus is not only on competitive, right? We are also trying to do a lot of the content creation side, do events here, bring ourselves out there, make a name for ourselves, all that kind of stuff. So that's something that for sure is in the focus. Like we want to make bigger events, we want to attract more people, we want to become a brand that the Nordic and UK people can
Mm.
authenticize with and can stand behind with, where they say, okay, this is our esport club, you know, like cheering for us, building a legacy. The classic goals. In terms of competitive, I mean, I don't think that spring was a success. I think if you look on the caliber of roster that we had, I think we should have gone to European Masters. I think that's pretty clear. But yeah, we lost to Verdant, and they put up a good show, and we had a bad day, and that's how the sport is from time to time. That's why it's so entertaining. So yeah, I mean, of course, like the goal is still, and it was already for this season, to go to European Masters and represent the Nordic and UK region there, and show the people that the NLC is not as bad as some people say, and yeah, prove them wrong, and that's it in regards of competitive.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you doing this interview, and I'm sure we will see, as you said, Nord Esports growing and dominating the League of Legends scene for a long time to come.
Yeah, I hope so.
Cheers.
I hope so too.